join me with me the big round of applause for Mr. Henry Donahue.
All right.
This is an interesting microphone.
Yeah.
Hope we can work with this, but okay. Anybody got any starch? Maybe we can do something with that. Yeah, thank you, Scott, for that nice introduction, and thank you to you for that warm welcome. I'm very fortunate to be the chairman of this wonderful program that we've had, I guess, in excess of 10 years. Tuesday Topics is a series of speakers who are either high-profile individuals or are going to speak about a high-profile topic. Of course, today, excuse me, our speaker fills that requirement. Excuse me. The other thing is that the business leaders of Charlotte realize this great way to reach out to our community and to make friends for business leaders of Charlotte as well as for Covenant Presbyterian Church. Just a couple of things. Some of you have seen these plates in the middle of the table, and they are there because of the fact that we ask you to make a donation of at least $5 if you're so moved to pay for the costs involved with this meeting. It's not a requirement, it's just an ask if you would be kind enough to do that. The other thing is that this program always ends at exactly 1 o'clock. And for those of you who are in the Army, that's 1,300 hours. If you were in the Navy, that would be 2 bells. If you're in the Marine Corps, Mickey's big hand is on the 12. I know, the Marines will get me for doing that. I just cannot resist that. That's simplified. Very good, very good. So, I want to ask you, if you would just let me for a moment here pause, and I guess it's Mike Barnes who is going to speak to you briefly about the business leaders of Charlotte, and then we'll have our blessing.
Thank you, Hank. Welcome, everybody. Glad to see a packed room. This is fantastic. It's a little tight, it's a little hot, but this is going to be a great event. And on behalf of business leaders of Charlotte, known as Block, I want to thank you very much for coming today. This is our third installment of the year of 2015. We are happy to be at this new wonderful location. Thank you very much to the church. And we hope that you will continue to join us the third Tuesday of every month, minus July and August. We do take a break in July and August. So again, third Tuesday of the month, go ahead and put it in your calendar. You can also get signed up on our website at businessleadersofcharlotte.com. Now, you're probably sitting there wondering, some of you, what is Business Leaders of Charlotte? Well, we are an alliance of professionals that provide opportunities to build business, grow friendship, and strengthen our community. And we do that through multiple avenues. We have monthly luncheons at our industry-exclusive luncheons. We have a monthly after hours that happens the last Wednesday of the month and is open to all that would like to join and come and network and swap business cards and build business and begin to grow some friendships. And then we also help to strengthen our community. And we do that through 3 events. One is a golf tournament, which is coming up in May 28th. May 28th, I've been told. And it is at the Ballantine Hotel and Lodge, which is in the Ballantine area. We do have sponsorships available, and that is open to the public. If you'd like to be a part of this incredible organization who's going to be benefacting an incredible organization called Patriots Path, we would love for you to see myself, see Scott. Our incredible president, Eric Erlenbach, is here. All right, not all at once. And Mike Wade. Joe Keener, our golf chairman, he is here today. Please come see him. Joe, is there anything else I need to say about the golf tournament? Okay. And we also have a music festival in October where we will raise money. And then finally in December we have what we call Block and Bowl, where we raise money for local families in need. Last year we raised $21,000. It was an incredible block and bold. And we're going to supersede that this year. The most we've ever donated in 1 year is about $50,000. And we're going to break that this year. I can feel it. The golf tournament's well on its way. Blocktoberfest is going to be headed by Julie LaChance, who's right out there. Julie, raise your hand. She's already planning it. That's a first. It usually takes till July before we start planning. So we're already 4 or 5 months ahead of schedule. So we're very excited. Again, we want to thank you for coming out here today. If you have any questions, please feel free to see myself. Visit our website, www.businessleadersofcharlotte.com. Thank you very much for coming.
One thing that Mike Lawrence does not lack is enthusiasm. And we admire you for that, and that great message that you brought us. And now no meeting of this type would be complete unless we have the blessing of Almighty God. Neely Lane is the Director of Youth Ministries here at Covenant Presbyterian Church. So Neely, would you please invoke the blessing of deity?
On behalf of Covenant Presbyterian Church, we welcome you to our facility. Just to let you know, the restrooms, you can go back out this way, and it's in the narthex, that entry of our fellowship hall. Thank you for the good work that you are doing. It's incredible. Let us pause and give thanks to God for the food we have and the fellowship we share. Let us pray. Holy and loving God, for the sunshine that reminds us of your grace shining down upon us, we give you thanks. We thank you for the tables in which we sit, the fellowship, and the faces in which we meet. And we thank you for this food. May it nourish us. Thank you for the people who prepared it with love. May it nourish us to go forth and be your servants and your disciples in everything that we do, even when we find it hard. So God, thank you for already blessing this time we share together. Thank you for the speaker and the words. Thank you for the administration calling this place to be. And all God's children say, amen.
Amen.
Enjoy your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker, who has become a friend of mine. One of the great parts about this volunteer spot that I have is the opportunity to meet some pretty wonderful people, and today is all part of that. I want to just share a thought before I tell you a little bit more in detail about our speaker. But it's amazing how things work out. I was telling someone earlier, Irvin heard me say this, is that I was sitting at my dining room table actually about 1.5 years ago reading the Charlotte Observer, and I read about him in the newspaper, and I thought, wouldn't he make a wonderful speaker? And I tracked him down through the help of some friends, and he was kind enough to come and speak at the Veterans Day celebration at the Matthews Rotary Club, which was last November the 11th. A very appropriate thing to have a message from Irving about this very, very interesting and important subject. I've told a number of people about this meeting, and my thought is this, and I hope it makes some sense to you, is that if you had a chance to sit down with a soldier, we'll say, who fought at Gettysburg, wouldn't that be a treat to have someone tell you about seeing that great moment in the history of our country? Well, you can't do that because those people are long gone. But we're very fortunate, we're blessed literally, to have a speaker who witnessed an incredible part of American history. He's a little bit older than I am, and he was a little bit more mature at that point in history, but I remember those days. Growing up in New York City, I read about them in the newspaper, but I never lived through them the way he has, and he's going to share that with you. So we are very, very fortunate. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about him, and he'll tell you the rest of the story. At the conclusion of his remarks, which I think you're going to find very, very meaningful, Irving has agreed to take questions, and we'll finish up at 1 o'clock, as I said earlier. But he's a survivor of the Holocaust, as you probably know. He was born in Dortmund, Germany, where he lived with his parents and his younger sister until he fled to Holland in 1939, and then to the United States in April of 1940. Irving speaks about his experiences as a young child after Hitler came to power, and what life in Germany was like for a Jewish child and his family, including what happened at Kristallnacht, and how he escaped to Holland, and then to the United States of America. When the war ended, he was in the United States Army on his way back to Europe, defending and fighting for the things that we all hold to be dear and that he came to look for in this rather troubled world that he grew up in. So let's welcome this man who has come to help us enrich our lives so that we can take some of the information he shares with us, so that it's my fervent hope, and I guess everyone in this room, that nothing like that will ever happen again. Irving, thank you.
Thank you, Henry, and thank you all for your warm welcome. It's a little bit overwhelming to speak to a group like this. I usually speak to a bunch of school children quite often, and this is something a little different. Now, I'm going to be telling you, as Henry mentioned before, my story. What it was like for a Jewish child to grow up in Nazi Germany. I was born in Dortmund, Germany. Dortmund is an industrial city with a population of about 600,000 people. My parents were middle class. My father was an accountant, and my mother was a homemaker. And I had a younger sister by the name of Sylvia. Now, we lived in a small apartment house which was owned by my grandmother. And I had an aunt and uncles and cousins who also had apartments in the same building. Life was good for us, that is, until January of 1933. In January of 1933, when I was 6.5 years old, the Nazi Party won the national election in Germany, and Adolf Hitler became the Chancellor of Germany. Now, Hitler, during the election campaign and many years before that, promised that if he were elected, he would bring jobs to the unemployed, he would abrogate the Versailles Treaty, and he would rid Germany of the Jewish people. He hated the Jews. He blamed the Germans of Jewish faith for all of Germany's problems, including the Depression. Jews had lived in Germany for over 1,000 years, had full citizenship, served bravely in the armed forces of Germany during World War I. 100,000 Jewish men served during the war, and 12,000 of them gave their life for the fatherland. But now, if he were elected, he would get rid of the Jews. Right after Hitler came to power, groups of Nazi hoodlums wearing brown uniforms and wearing swastika armbands drove around the city in an open truck, and they would grab any Jewish men they would find on the street, and they would beat them up for no other reasons that they were Jewish. Jewish students could no longer attend public schools, and I had to attend a segregated school that was run by the Jewish community of Dortmund. Higher education, such as high schools and university, were no longer available to Jewish students. Then the Nazis went around the city and they painted on the front of Jewish businesses, "This is a Jewish business. Germans do not patronize this business." The Nazis then passed a number of laws known as the Nuremberg Laws, which restricted the civil rights of Jewish people and also restricted the occupation Jews could practice. For instance, Jews who were civil servants lost their jobs, and in general, these laws made his life was very difficult. I was spat on while walking on the street. I was called a dirty Jew. I was beaten by other kids, many of them older than I was. And there was nothing that we could do about the beatings and all the other indignities we were subjected to. And since we had to go to a Jewish school, the Nazi Hitler Jews, those knew where to find us, and they would wait for us when we got out of school and beat us up. I used to try different routes going home, and I became a very good runner. Nobody ever tried to help me or to interfere in what the hoodlums did to us, other than to call us dirty Jew, get out of Germany. And we would have left, except for the fact that no country in the world will let us in. Not France, England, Holland, Belgium, South America, Palestine, which was under British control, or even the United States. The United States at the time had a very restrictive quota system that only allowed a small number of immigrants to enter the United States each year. Shortly after Hitler came to power, my father went to the American consulate in Stuttgart and registered for a quota number for immigration to the United States. In addition to the quota number, if it came up, you had to have a sponsor in the United States that would guarantee that the immigrant would not become a public burden. Considering the fact that the number of quota certificates that were issued each year were very small, and the ability to find a sponsor was very difficult, not many people were able to leave for the United States. I enjoyed playing soccer. Soccer was a popular sport in Germany, and we would go to an open field that was near us and play soccer. Always on the lookout to see if anybody was coming to break up the game and beat us up before we had a chance to run away. Under Jewish dietary laws, we are required to eat kosher food, particularly meat. The Nazis then passed a law that kosher meat was forbidden. There was a kosher butcher store across the street from where we lived, and one day I saw a bunch of Nazis enter the store and drag the owner, Mr. Rosenfeld, out in the street. They beat him up, and then they set his beard on fire. Whenever anybody left their home, one was always afraid of what would happen on the streets and if you would get home safely. Not that you were really safe in your own home. Sometime in 1936, we were informed that we had to get out of the school building that we were attending. The building was needed for the Hitler Youth. And our school then moved to an old abandoned school building, which was much smaller, and we had to go on to double sessions. Then new laws were passed. Jews could no longer be treated by non-Jewish doctors. Unfortunately, there weren't many Jewish doctors in Dortmund, and some had managed to leave Germany. Initially, we thought that the Nazis would respect the Jewish war veterans who had served in the German army during World War I. These veterans had an organization called the Jewish War Veterans, or soldiers who served on the front line. In Dortmund, these veterans had a club and sports facility. And we used these facilities, and while in there, we felt some measure of security. However, sometime in 1936, the Nazis closed the facility. One Sunday, my father took me to see an operetta. When we got to the concert hall, we found a sign that said, "Jews not allowed." New laws had been passed. Jews could not attend concerts, movies, or any public functions. All parks and recreation facilities were closed to Jews. My father, as an accountant, worked for a number of Jewish-owned firms. In 1938, a new law was passed. Jews could no longer own a business. All businesses had to be sold to Aryans. The law said sold. In fact, the Jewish owners did not receive any money. The money went to the Nazi Party. Two of the businesses my father worked for were owned by my cousins of my father. They both manufactured and sold men's suits and coats. One day a Nazi came to the office and told my cousin that he was buying his business. My cousin told him, "Okay, just give me a little time and to take care of a few things, and then the business is yours," and of course he had no other choice. The Nazis left, and my cousin was about to hand over his life's work and give it all to the Nazis. He immediately stopped production and started to liquidate the inventory. A short time later, the Nazi came back, and when he walked in, said to my cousin, "What is going on here?" My cousin gave him some story, and when the Nazi left, my cousin, his wife, and daughter immediately left, and they went to Cologne, and from there hired a smuggler who smuggled them into Belgium. My father was in the office at the time when this happened, and he came home, and he told the story to my mother, who told my father you must leave immediately, because you knew about what was going on and did not report it to the police. The Gestapo will come and arrest you. My father left immediately. I was 12 years old at the time, and I'd gone to school that morning, and when I came home from school, my father was gone. It was Thursday, September the 20th, 1938. When we got home from school, my mother got my sister and me together and told us that we had to be brave, that Papa had to leave, and that no matter what, we didn't know where Papa was, and we really didn't. That evening, my mother collected all the photos that had my father's picture in them and burned them. She did not want the Gestapo to have a photo of my father so that it would be more difficult for them to find him. In fact, my father went to a nearby city, Gelsenkirchen, where a first cousin lived, and spent the night there. And in the morning, my cousin who had a car drove him to Cologne, where my father hired a smuggler who smuggled him into Belgium. The next morning, after my father left, the Gestapo came to our house, and they wanted to know where my father was. My mother told them that he had gone to work. When they told her that he wasn't there, she told them, then you must have him. What did you do to him? And my mother stuck to the story, and after a week of questioning, they left us alone. Shortly thereafter, my sister was diagnosed to have diabetes. She needed medical care and medication. There was only one Jewish doctor left in Dortmund, and medication was difficult to obtain because of all the restrictions that were imposed upon us. And our situation was getting very desperate. Now, there lived in Germany about 30,000 Jews who were Polish citizens, who had migrated to Germany from Poland at the beginning of the 20th century to escape anti-Semitic persecution in Poland and also for economic reasons. Without warning, on a Friday morning, October the 20th, 1938, at 5:30 in the morning, police knocked at our doors, and they were arresting all the Polish Jews who lived in Germany and deporting them to Poland. Early that morning, they took away my grandmother, aunt and uncle, and a number of cousins. They were allowed to take with them only what they could carry. They were put on a train and deported to Poland, where they were brought to the Polish border and dropped off in an open field. I never saw my grandmother, uncle, and aunts, cousins again. They were all murdered by the Nazis. Among the people that were deported that day was a couple by the name of Greenspan. Now, the Greenspans had a son. He was about 17 or 18 years old, and he lived in Paris. He was studying, going to school and studying there. And he was so incensed by what had happened to his parents that he took a gun and went to the German embassy and shot the first secretary of the German embassy. He was severely wounded and succumbed to his wounds about a day or two later, and he died during the night of November 8th, 9th, 1938. Now we immediately realized that we were in big trouble. That morning, Joseph Goebbels, the propaganda minister, got on the radio and told the German people that the Jews must be punished for this crime. On the night of November 19th, 1938, millions of Germans took to the streets, and they burned all the synagogues in Germany. My sister, who had gone to bed to be awakened by terrible noises in the street, and I got up and asked my mother what was going on, and she told me that there were some drunks outside. Now I got up and peered up from behind the curtains, and I could see the synagogue a little further down the street burning. And there were thousands of people in the streets, breaking windows and yelling, Juden raus and Juden verrecken, which meant out with the Jews and exterminate them. At that moment, I thought that I was going to die. They were going from house to house, apartment to apartment where Jewish people lived, as well as Jewish businesses, and smashing any glass, crystal, dishes, store windows, beating up Jewish men, and taking many of them to concentration camps. During that night, they came into our house, and a very kind and brave Christian woman who lived in an apartment on the top floor of our building went down and told them that we had all been deported on October 28th. She showed them the seals that the police had put on the apartment where my grandmother and my uncle had lived. And they left. Around 9 in the morning, though, they came back. And this time they came into our apartment and they started to smash our dishes, crystal, cutting up our bedding, and beating up a friend who was in our apartment, knocking out his front teeth. Among the Nazis that came into our apartment was a policeman. My mother told the policeman, "Why are you allowing these people to do this to us? You're supposed to protect us." The policeman told her, "You dirty Jew, we want you to get out of Germany." My mother then grabbed my sister and I and ran out of the house and went to the police station, and she demanded that they protect us. The policeman behind the desk asked, "Okay, I'll put you in protective custody," and started to take out a key. My mother then took us by the hand and ran out of the police station. People who were put in protective custody never came back. When we got home, the Nazis had left our apartment, and the apartment was a big mess. There was broken glass, windows were broken, the dishes were all broken, there were feathers from our bedding and belongings strewn all over the apartment. That night, the night of November 9th, 10th, became known as Kristallnacht or Crystal Night. That night, 91 Jewish men were murdered, 30,000 Jewish men were taken to concentration camps, and more than 300 synagogues were burned and destroyed. After Crystal Night, the Jewish community of Germany was fined 1 billion marks to pay for the damage. It was the beginning of the Holocaust, where 6 million Jews were murdered. Shortly after Crystal Night, a Nazi came to our house and told us he was the new owner and we had to get out of the house. Where do we go? On January 1, 1939, my mother dressed my sister in warm clothing, packed a small suitcase, and bought a train ticket to Amsterdam, Holland for her. My sister was 10 years old at the time and did not have a visa to go to Holland. My mother got on the train with her and walking through the train asked people to take my sister to Amsterdam. Fortunately, there was a very kind Dutch woman on the train who had a daughter of my sister's age who was not with her, but who was noted in her passport. She agreed to take my sister and brought her to Amsterdam, where she turned her over to the Jewish community of Amsterdam. My mother went home and did the same thing with me 2 weeks later on Sunday, January 15, 1939. And I was 12 years old at the time. However, this time nobody on the train would help us. When we got to the border, an SS man came on board to check our passports. He took my mother's passport from her and she had to get off the train, but he allowed me to stay on, even though I did not have a visa to go to Holland. After I crossed the border, the Dutch border police came on board. I showed him my passport, but no visa. He asked me where I was going, and I told him that I was going to visit my uncle in Amsterdam. He told me I was lying and took me off the train. The policeman had me sit on a bench on the platform. It was very cold, and he brought me a cup of hot chocolate and a cheese sandwich, and left. And he told me to stay there. I sat there for several hours. In the meantime, 2 trains going back to Germany came by and left, and they did not put me on these trains to send me back. After a while, the policeman came back and took me to a small hotel. Evidently, they were not sending me back, at least not that evening. I stayed in the hotel for 2 nights, and then in the morning, a Jewish man from Arnhem came and took me to his home in the city of Arnhem. I stayed overnight in his house, and in the morning he took me by train to a children's home in Wijkenzee, which is on the coast, on the Dutch coast. And there I found my sister. We stayed there in this children's home for 3 months, and then we were sent to an orphanage in Amsterdam, where there were other children there who had gotten there by Kindertransport. I was in the orphanage till April 1940. In the meantime, after I fled to Holland, my mother hired a smuggler to smuggle her into Belgium. Now, she was caught the first time by the Germans, and spent the night in jail, but made it into Belgium on the second try. The quota number my father had registered for at the American consulate in 1933 had come up, and he received a visa to come to the United States. He came to the United States in June of 1939. Once in the United States, my father found a sponsor for my mother, my sister, and myself, and we received our visa to enter the United States in March of 1940. We were reunited on April the 5th, 1940, as we boarded the ship that would take us to the United States. We left Rotterdam, Holland, on April the 5th, 1940, and arrived in New York on April the 17th, 1940. The Germans invaded Holland and Belgium and France on May the 10th, 1940. We were probably on the last ship to leave Holland for the United States before the German invasion. And I returned to Europe exactly 5 years later, on April the 5th, 1945, when I passed through the Straits of Gibraltar on the United States troop ship USS Wakefield on the way to Italy as a soldier in the United States Army during World War II. And that is my story, and I'll be glad to answer my questions. Yes, sir.
I've got a question for you. You said that in 1933, Hitler passed the Enabling Act, which took away civil rights for Jewish people.
Yeah, including citizenship.
So what now?
Including citizenship.
Including citizenship. How do you think that compares with the things that are happening today with like the Patriot Act and the NDAA, where we actually have the ability, or the government has the ability to indefinitely intern or disappear or detain American citizens? Is that something that could ever happen here in America, in your opinion?
Well, I think it's a little different. The Patriot Act, I don't agree with all of it anyway, but citizenship really is taken away. You still have citizenship, and it's still the rule of law basically applies, even if basically it's used to find out who might want to harm the United States. Okay? So it's a little different. Our citizenship was taken away not because we might harm the United States, but it was taken away from us because we were Jewish. No other reason.
Was there more laws passed after the?
Oh yeah, there were many more laws, but as time went by, we couldn't be treated by a non-Jewish doctor. We couldn't go to a movie. We couldn't go into a park. We couldn't. The hours that we could go to a grocery were limited to certain times. We had lots of limitations. We couldn't go to school. The school we went to was a school that was operated by the Jewish community. Only eight grades, and if you wanted to go to high school or university, you couldn't go to school. People who worked for there were teachers in German schools, professors. They all lost their jobs.
Was those laws passed after the Jewish man shot the minister at the Reichstag? After the German shot the was the first minister? Were more of those laws enacted after the fact? After they considered that all Jews had to pay for that crime?
Yes. Yeah. Right after the Kristallnacht, they fined the Jewish community for all the damage that was done. They decided it was $1 billion marks. In fact, they confiscated all the Jewish money and wealth anyway. So they had all the money anyway.
Have you been back to Germany, and if so, can you describe what that was like?
Yeah, I went back to Germany. I was in the textile machinery business, and we exhibited in different countries, international exhibits, our equipment, including Germany, and I used to go to these exhibits. But I never went back to Dortmund, and I never will. Yeah.
First, on behalf of Block, thank you for revisiting that story. Amazing. Your parents sound like amazing, amazing people. I'm curious, what they did when they landed in the U.S. their first maybe 5-10 years here. How successful? What did they do?
You have to remember that when they came here, the United States was still in the Depression. It was very difficult to get a job. Certainly my father could not be an accountant here. That was out of the question. My father went peddling. He went out peddling clothing and stuff like that. Then he learned a new trade, became a watchmaker. My mother who never worked before, went to work in a factory sewing pockets on there. And life was very difficult for us.
Thank you.
Can I say something? I'm also Jewish, all right? And because I'm Jewish, we experience this like on a daily basis because we all have relatives that were killed in Germany. But the one thing I wanted to say, which has nothing to do with this gentleman, but has to do with Americans, one American entrepreneur, Henry Ford, okay, if everyone here doesn't know, Henry Ford actually helped Hitler. He also wrote the propaganda against Jews, and you can look that up on the internet. It was with his help also that the Jews were killed, because he had gone to get a loan from a bank. I guess that was, I don't even know if it was owned by Jews at the time, but he couldn't get the loan to start the conveyor, like the assembly line that he wanted to do for his cars. And when he didn't get that loan, he wrote all this propaganda against Jews. So, and Adolf Hitler actually used a lot of that propaganda. And there was also a lot of American entrepreneurs that helped the German cause, okay? They did the tanks, they did a whole bunch of stuff. So, yeah, and we weren't allowed into the United States. There's a great book by Ruth Gruber called, I think it's called Haven, where a whole ship was sent back because Roosevelt didn't let him in. That's all I want to say.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Yes.
I consider that time in American history to be yet another black mark. The people of this country were not told a lot of what was going on. Our government kept it from us. And I wonder how you were able to forgive our government for turning a blind eye to what was going on, as well as the governments of the rest of the world would not allow you to emigrate.
Well, it's true the United States was not very helpful in helping the Jewish people who wanted to flee to Germany to the United States or any other country that they would let them in. But then again, the United States made many sacrifices to win the war against Hitler, and for that I'm very grateful. And I was in a little way I was a part of that, and was very grateful to be able to do that.
It's sort of along the same lines of forgiveness. Out of all the atrocities that you've experienced and you saw and you had to live through, and you could see just how cruel people can be, what are some of the things that you've done inside to find forgiveness and be able to believe in people and trust again?
Well, I don't have any hate for the German people that are living, the newer generations that are living in Germany today. They're good people, and I think they're good people just like we are. On the other hand, the people that lived in my generation in Germany, who committed these horrendous crimes, and I cannot forgive them. I cannot forgive them. And if somebody tells you that they didn't know about it, how could they not? They were all part of it. To kill and murder 6 million people, it took a lot of people to do that. took the railway system that had thousands of employees to transport all these Jewish people to the death camps. And it took thousands of people to kill the 6 million Jews. It took the best of the German industrialists to design these crematoriums and these death camps. And they used the best of their talent. Nobody can tell me that they didn't know about it. They did it. They did it. So how can I forgive those people? I can't. On the other hand, the people that are living there today, they're different people.
I want to thank you personally for serving our country and protecting the freedoms that we hold so dear, even though your freedoms were taken away.
Yes, sir.
You were kind of what she was saying, the propaganda. I was just wondering, what were some of the things that they used to sell that you were the reasoning for the Depression? And, you know, I mean, how did they sell that to so many people?
Well, Germany, of course, Germany lost the war. They did not believe that they lost the war. They believed that the Jews caused them to lose the war. Germany did not lose the war, and so they blamed us for losing the war, even though out of a population of 450,000 Jews, 100,000 Jews served in the armed forces, 12,000 died, got killed. We were responsible for them losing the war. They blamed the Jews, that the Jews controlled all the businesses, and therefore they caused the Depression. So all of Germany's problems were the fault of the Jews. Don't forget, Hitler didn't invent anti-Semitism. There was anti-Semitism there for many, many centuries. He used it. He used it very successfully. Yes, sir.
Are you still in contact with any other survivors of that time period?
Yeah, there are a few others that are still alive in Charlotte, and yes, I'm in contact with them.
Is there a community of support, or how, by contact, elaborate if you will?
Well, we know each other. You know, we came to the United States. We made new lives for ourselves, and we are really no different than anybody else.
Fascinating.
There's somebody back there.
Sure.
Yes.
Throughout your life and travels, have you ever met anyone from Germany of your generation that expressed remorse?
Remorse. Yeah. Well, I've met a few that lived during that generation. They blame everything on Hitler. And of course, he did it all by himself.
So you had indicated that there was one night that you felt that was going to be the end. Did you feel that every night after that, or
Yes.
what kept you hopeful? What kept you hopeful?
Well, it was from day to day that you lived to another day, and we didn't know what the next day would bring. And then one day some Nazi comes into our house and says, "I'm the new owner. You have to get out." Where do we go? Where would we go? Remember, I was trying to figure out whom we could move in with, you know, and didn't have any answers. In the back there.
Thanks for being here today. I really appreciate it. One of the 100,000 Jewish soldiers that fought for Germany in World War I was my father's father. He left Germany shortly after the war because of what my father was told was rampant anti-Semitism. And that was 13 years before Hitler was elected. My father was born here, and ironically, he fought for America in World War II. And for him, knowing everything in his family's history, it was kind of personal. Was that how you felt? And also, what was the climate of fellow American soldiers alongside with whom you were fighting? Was it just patriotic to them, or did they discuss with them what went on in Germany, and did they feel, and did it motivate them more, or were they just being patriotic Americans and didn't care one way or the other about your experience, your type of experience?
Well, as far as the American soldiers were concerned, I know that the men that I was with, there was some anti-Semitism even among our own men, but by and large, I got along very well with the men that I served with, particularly the men in my squad and my company. We got along very well. How did they feel? They wanted to defeat Germany. They wanted to defeat the Nazis. They wanted to put an end to it.
In the time that your father left to Belgium and ultimately your family was completely separated, how much communication and if you had communication, what type of communication would you have?
Good question, because we didn't have the internet in those days. By mail. When it took a while. For instance, my father fled for about 2 weeks. We didn't know whether he had made it to course or not until we got some mail from him. It's quite possible that mail may have come earlier. It may have been intercepted by the Gestapo. But it took about 2 weeks, and we found out that my father was in Belgium. So when I went to Holland, I wrote to my mother in Germany, and I wrote to my father in Belgium, and that's how we communicated.
Did you ever find out what happened to your aunt and grandmother and uncle? Where she was
yeah, well, I found what happened to my aunt and my uncle, but never, the Nazis kept very meticulous records of the people that they murdered. They recorded the date, where and when, and those records were found after the war. They're today in Israel at the Yad Vashem. And you can go there, and I think you can go online and find out the dates when they were murdered, and you can find the dates. I could not find what happened to my grandmother. Could not find.
With the confiscation of the Jewish wealth, how did your parents each find money to hire the people necessary to transport them out of Germany? Did they have jewels? How was that done?
My parents, my father had a good job, and they saved some money, and that money was used to pay for the smugglers, and they lived for 2 years in Belgium, a year and a half in Belgium, and transportation. And they used their money, they used it all up to get out of Germany, to come to the United States. Yes, sir.
Mr. Beinstock, I too want to thank you for coming and sharing your story today. It is a moving one, let's say, if you've had any kind of similar experiences. My question, I need to ask you first, do you have any children?
No, I do not.
Okay, the reason I ask you that, I can appreciate your non-forgiveness of the people who tormented you and persecuted you and stuff like that. I think that's highly natural that it's happening directly to you. I just wonder if you had children, would you expect them to be as unforgiving to a whole generation of people, whether they were actively involved or whether they just knew about it? Maybe you can understand why.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I don't see how you can forgive. First of all, the only people that can forgive are the people that were murdered, and they can't speak for themselves. So, as far as I'm concerned, and I can't forgive them for what I did, what they did to me either. Would I have asked my children to forgive the Germans who perpetrated these atrocities? I don't think so. I don't think I would have asked them to do that.
Okay, Irving has agreed to stay a little while, huh?
Yeah.
And do some one-on-ones with anybody who would like to talk to him one-on-one, which I think is very kind. Your questions are just amazing. I want to thank you personally for coming. It's interesting what's happening, because we live in a world that's very troubled today. We all know that. One of the things that I've gotten from listening to Irving is that Hitler, being the brilliant leader that he was, knew that if he could unite Germany behind him, that he would get the power that he did. And if you read any of the history books that were written about it, it'll tell you that he knew that if you could have a common hate amongst your people, it would unite them. It's an old trick. It's as old as time itself. Leaders have always done that. And I would just say, and hopefully you might agree with me, that something like this is such a heinous, horrible act that you would just hope that someday no one would ever be thinking about the nightmare that happened in Europe. And if you ever see the seeds of someone trying to unite a group by hating somebody else, you would have no part of it. I hope that's what we can get from what you said.
Absolutely.
I hope so too, but unfortunately, it's happening today.
Yeah, it is. And that's one of the reasons why I was hoping you would be here today and take that message with you, because it's up to each and every one of us to take up this cause that Irving has shared with us, so that these heinous acts would never happen again. Just, he's a grown man, he's a person who's lived through this, shared this whole thing with us, but just think of him as a young boy. Think of his sister as a young girl. I'm sure you're thinking about that. And yet he has gone on with his life and lived a good life and contributed to society, and now has been kind enough to share this with you and me so that we can become better people. I want to thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. And you're dead. There's a young man standing behind you.
Real quick, we've had a lot of tremendous speakers here at Tuesday Topics, but none have spoken to us in a more powerful, impactful time of our history, and like my father said, hopefully we learn from that. It speaks volumes about the fact that this is probably the largest crowd we've ever had at a Tuesday Topics is because of you. On behalf of the business leaders of Charlotte and all of our friends that are here today, we're going to make a donation in your name to the Butterfly Project and the Jewish Community Center, which is supporting the Holocaust education to children and everybody. So on behalf of everybody here today, thank you very much.